To anyone that has a disability or disorder, what's the worst thing a teacher's ever said about it?
I have APD, which means my hearing is a little screwed up.
So when I went to get accommodations for my foreign language class, my teacher just said, I don't think you have a disorder. I think you just get nervous for tests. You don't need accommodations. As if she was the person diagnosing me.
As if she was my doctor.
To anyone that has a disability or disorder, what's the worst thing a teacher's ever said about it?
I have a neuromuscular disorder called dystonia, and it's a functional disorder, so things trigger it. In 10th grade, I had fitness at the end of the day, like the very end of the day, like 5th period. And we were doing this exercise this one day, pushing like a 25-pound weight across the floor, like on a towel. And about halfway through the class, this triggered my back, and my back really started to hurt, and I started to get like this, because that's what happens. And I told my teacher, and she was like, you're fine. It's almost the end of the day. So I was like, okay. So I kept going. A couple minutes later, I literally couldn't walk and I couldn't breathe because my rib and my hip were crushing my right lung. So I went over to my teacher and I was like, I need to call my mom. I need to go home now. I need my meds. I couldn't bring my meds to school because they were opiates. So, controlled substance. Meanwhile, I could barely even talk to her and tell her I needed help because I literally could not breathe. And she said, no, you can wait. Part 2's already up.
To anyone that has a disability or disorder, what's the worst thing a teacher's ever said about it?
My guidance counselor signed me up for sign language.
To anyone that has a disability or disorder, what's the worst thing a teacher's ever said about it?
So I have albinism, so I'm legally blind, visually impaired, can't see, not good. But in school, all my books and tests and papers and everything had to be enlarged with big font so I could actually see it. And probably more than half my teachers would always forget to do that. Like, they just wouldn't enlarge my stuff, so I would be staring at the paper, just face in it. And their excuse would be that, well, I have 100 other kids to teach, I just forgot. If you're a teacher and one of your students has special accommodations that they need so that they can succeed in the classroom, you don't really have an excuse. You should probably do what they need so that they can succeed. Yeah.
To anyone that has a disability or disorder, what's the worst thing a teacher's ever said about it?
Once, a teacher tried to say that I was useless to the world. Most of the teachers that I had, they thought the same. Although I had a handful of great teachers who believed in me, now I give presentations to those teachers that do undermine disabled people because I want to change the education system.
To anyone that has a disability or disorder, what's the worst thing a teacher's ever said about it?
I've been waiting for this. I have a bunch of disabilities that cause issues with brain fog and memory retention, so I have the legal right to disability accommodations in school. And Miss Lena Erickson at Western Washington University tried to tell me I wasn't allowed to have them. She actually lied to me and told me that the entire psychology department didn't allow memory aids as disability accommodations, which is illegal, and I called her out on it. The Disability Accommodation Center told her, you can't deny her these accommodations. You could get prosecuted. And yes, the department of course allows it. She told them that letting disabled kids have disability accommodations is unfair to those who don't have disabilities. In the end, the Disability Center forced her to let me have them, but she insisted that it wasn't fair because I quote-unquote didn't look disabled. I'm not sure what someone with brain trauma was supposed to look like to her, but evidently I wasn't it.
To anyone that has a disability or disorder, what's the worst thing a teacher's ever said about it?
So I'm autistic. I wasn't diagnosed late in life. I was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome when I was 4 years old. It's an outdated term, but that's what they classified me as. And my teachers, for the most part, were pretty cool with it. I had an IEP in school, and I had as much help as they could possibly give me. I had a hard time comprehending math and science and what have you. But there's a lesser-known trait of autism that isn't talked about enough, and that's bad handwriting. Here's notes I made for one of my videos. Now, my handwriting, as you can see, is less than desirable. It looks like a child wrote it. Here's some more. As you can see, it's pretty bad. Now, understandably, my teachers had a really hard time understanding my handwriting. And they would constantly give me a hard time about my handwriting. Now, like I said, this is a lesser-known trait about autism, but it's fairly common. And I'm pretty sure my teachers did not know about this. But when I try to write neat, it physically hurts my hand. I'm 26 and I still get crap about it at my job. I just can't win, guys.
Anyone that has a disability or disorder, what's the worst thing a teacher's ever said about it?
I have so many stories. So I'm hard of hearing, and because of that I need certain accommodations, and I've really battled with teachers and administrators to get these. One of my teachers was so resistant to provide closed captions on videos, even though it was on my 504 plan, and this accessibility is literally required by law. But he said to me, "I'm busy outside of school. I have a life. I don't have time to make accommodations for you." I also have a Roger pen, which teachers wear around their necks like a lanyard, and it amplifies their voices and my hearing aids. Several school administrators were giving a safety presentation on the procedure of if a shooter enters, and they refused to wear the Roger pen because they, quote, had stage fright, and wearing it would have compounded on this and made it too hard for them. A girl a year younger than me also used a Roger pen, and one of her male teachers refused to wear it because he thought it would threaten his masculinity. Don't work in education if you're not going to accommodate all students.
To anyone that has a disability or disorder, what's the worst thing a teacher's ever said about it?
So I have trichotillomania, which is a compulsory disorder where you pull your hair out. And one time in middle school, I was taking a test and I was really stressed out, so I started pulling my hair out. And I didn't really notice how bad it was until I turned it into my teacher and saw like hair like all over the paper. So the teacher takes my test, sees like hair everywhere, holds it up to the class and like sarcastically says, "Hey guys, guess whose paper this is?" And like someone said, "Oh, it's probably Corey's." And then like everyone started laughing. So yeah, that was pretty scarring. I still think about it today, even though it's almost been 10 years. More of like disbelief as to like why someone would do that.
To anyone that has a disability or disorder, what's the worst thing a teacher's ever said about it?
Sorry, my brows look funny, but I just dyed them, so. I have hearing aids in both ears. My math teacher in 4th grade, she kept turning her back to us because she was facing the blackboard. And I told her that I could not hear what she was saying. I asked her if she could repeat herself. She thought I was being rude. I think like I asked her 3 times maybe to repeat herself. And she got so mad that she said,
"If I could not keep quiet, you would kick me out of class."
I was just thinking, you know what, fine, here, I will not listen. All of a sudden, 5 minutes later, she asked, "Hey, are you listening?" And I said, "I already told you, I cannot hear what you're saying." And she got so mad and she said,
"Maybe you should just learn to listen."
Disabled people, what's the worst thing that a teacher has said?
Yo, I have stories. Okay, hi, I'm autistic. This is my experience in the mainstream schooling system. RA teachers in prep grade 4, grade 5, grade 6, all different schools, may I add, told me I was going to hell. Fair enough, I should not have been born autistic. That's on me. Sorry, Jesus. IT teacher grade 5 whipped me over the hands with a metal ruler because I questioned her teaching methods and wasn't touch typing fast enough. I can now touch type at over 135 words per minute, so thank you, I suppose. Substitute homeroom teacher grade 6 told me that I must either be deaf or the R word because I asked her to repeat a task that she had explained poorly. She got fired, so that's all's well that ends well, I suppose. Anyway, this one's my personal favourite. Music teacher, grade 6, belted me over the head with a Shakespeare Bible. A handcuff-sized Shakespeare Bible just bonked me over the head because my little autistic ass was overwhelmed and could not handle her class very well because she was a horrendous teacher. And she just thought a firm smack to the noggin would just knock the autism out of me. So anyway, that's my experience in the mainstream schooling system. Thanks for opening my TED Talk.
To anyone that has a disability or disorder, what's the worst thing a teacher's ever said about it?
So a lot of you that have been watching on my channel for quite a long time, a lot of you know that I have absence seizures. What a lot of you don't know is that I actually have a learning disability. So back in elementary school, in the small shitty town that I grew up in California, I was put in a special needs class because of my learning disability. But once the teachers found out that it wasn't that bad, they decided to use me as a teacher's pet to help the other special needs kids. There was even a time where the teacher sat down with my parents for a parent-teacher conference and flat out said that I will never graduate high school and go to college because of my learning disability. Beat that, bitches!